So we're taking a quick look under the hood here at our ePro, and the purpose of this video is really just to look at what things we need to inspect, what kind of reasonable levels are in some of these reservoirs, and what we're actually looking at here when we're underneath the hood. So we're going to start here on the left side facing the vehicle, and got the basics. You got a windshield washer fluid reservoir. This is a little low. We should probably add some more fluid to this. Fluid fill neck for that is up here. Depending on which vehicle you have, you may have this, or you may have something more like this over here, where you have a yellow cap, but those are both windshield washer fluid fill points. This is your power steering reservoir. This takes a special fluid. It's CHF11, or there's a spec, Chrysler spec that's outlined in the service documentation. You want this to be kind of where it says in the dipstick between min and max, so we can kind of look in there and see there's fluid in there. That's a good check to do if you're hearing any weird noise with your steering system, to make sure that that's not leaking. Moving over here, we have, this is the AC compressor, drives the refrigerant system in here. That's a high voltage compressor. Basically the same thing you'd have in a regular internal combustion vehicle, except instead of being powered by the belt from the engine, this is powered by a dedicated high voltage motor. So the next thing over towards the right is we have the coolant reservoir for the battery and powertrain. So this cap right here and the reservoir below it is what holds that coolant. That's G48. Has to be G48. We don't like to mix coolant, it'll cause corrosion problems. And it's hard to see here on video, but you want to be between that min and the max line there on the side of the reservoir. And moving over, have the 12-volt battery, as you would expect. In order to remove this, if you do need to remove it, you have to take this bracket off, you have to disconnect the terminals, and you also have to disconnect, or should you take off this little foot here on the front in order to pop the 12-volt up between this space and this space here. Continuing on, we have the coolant reservoir for the cabin heater loop. So this vehicle has a heat exchanger in the HVAC case in the dash that's designed to exchange liquid to air to heat the cabin. So these two lines right here, this one behind it, are our cabin heater core lines, our inlet or outlet. So this basically holds the coolant that gets pumped and heated. There's a little heater behind this guy that uses the pack voltage to heat coolant and circulate it through the cabin. This guy needs to be at least around the min line. This is probably a little low, but we don't want to put too much coolant in here because it increases the amount of liquid you have to heat when you want to heat it up. So it makes the cabin heater take a little bit longer than it should. This reservoir is carryover from the ProMaster. This is the original coolant reservoir that it comes in the ProMaster in that original location. So we flush this out, clean it, and this also uses G48 just to keep it consistent. This loop can be whatever, provided that between changing the types of coolant, you flush it out very thoroughly and you rinse it so that you don't end up with corrosion problems on the inside, which will affect the cabin heater performance. So the next thing we got to look at is the master cylinder brake fluid reservoir. Basically, same thing as it is on a ProMaster, unmodified. You've got your level on the side here, your min, your max. You gotta make sure that there's fluid in there and periodically flush that per the recommendations that Chrysler makes for this vehicle. And then the last things that are kind of important to look at are the fuse box. All of the powertrain components added by Maxwell don't have fuses. They use an eFuse module that comes with them, at least all the components that are in the engine bay area. The components that are in the dash have a separate dash fuse block that's covered in another video. But all of the things that remain in the vehicle from Chrysler that would have fuses normally have fuses in this fuse box. So if you're wondering why you might have a headlight out, or maybe want I don't know, your clearance lights are out or something like that, you should take a look at the Chrysler manual for the fuse box here. This guy just pops off. There's two M8s, or 8mm M5 nuts on here that come off. We leave these on hand tight or completely off because you don't really need to hold this on. This stays on pretty well. This is a jump post from the original vehicle. Now, this vehicle should not be jumped from this point and this point. If you do need to jump this 12-volt, jump it directly at the battery. Don't jump it here. And then to get this cover off, once you've taken the fasteners off, this little thing here is actually factory. This is the way that it's supposed to sit. You just pull this out of the way, and then you pull this cover off. And that gives you access to the fuse block that came with the original vehicle. There are some fuse callouts here on the inside of the lid to designate what's what, but you'll have to refer to the LIM ProMaster user guide that comes with the vehicle to determine what goes to what. And obviously ignoring things like, you know, the engine fuses and whatnot. Man, I think this would go in here a little easier. There we go. Hard to do with one hand. So lastly, we've got the fireman cut loop. This one doesn't have a label on it. It's not restrained as well as it should be, but this thing in here is basically, you know, a first responder cut loop. It cuts the power to the contactors in the high voltage battery pack. So we want to make sure that the pack is safe if, you know, an accident happens or something like that. It's quite rare that even in you know, production vehicles like the Chevy Bolt, for instance, that have these, it's quite rare that these actually get cut. But it's here just for safety anyways. And then behind it, we've got our 12-volt vacuum booster pump. This provides a brake boost through the master cylinder and the vacuum accumulator here. So sometimes you'll hear that thing kick on when you hit the brake. And way down in the back there, the last thing to look at, it's kind of hard to see, is the electronic braking control module. Does ABS and whatnot, but that's all Ram original. You don't have to really think about that. So this is the engine bay of the ePro, everything that we got in there.